Hail to the vagrant souls and denizens of my unholy and defiled crypt. The hallowed hour and time of my reckoning is close at hand. For when the pure glow of full moonlight shines upon the profane sod of my gnarled tomb, I shall return once more. My formal apologies and obeisance to you all. My name is Meshi, hallowed priestess, bounty hunter of souls, and accursed purveyor of the dead. Without further delay, please do allow me to briefly explain the reason as to my extended absence from the Twitch platform, as well as the drought of YouTube content updates, and just why I have not been streaming as of late. As many of you may remember, my most recent undertaking was Hidetaka Miyazaki's most recent groundbreaking fantasy RPG, Elden Ring, along with its highly revered expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, which I similarly regarded quite highly. Now, as many of you may recall, I've been residing and living within my late grandparents' home for the better part of my life, save for about 7 years, where I lived in the neighboring city of Motley Terrace with my abusive father, while I attended both late primary school and secondary school. They pretty much provided me with everything I could ever want, and I never really had rent obligations to meet, and nor was I expected to hold down a job, though over the course of my living there, I offered monetary contributions from time to time, and they shied it away, each and every time. All in all, I was very well looked after. I wanted for nothing. I always had a warm bed and clothes to fit, and I'm not gonna lie, it would have been a good life if it wasn't for my pathetic shitbag of an abusive father that I would have been infinitely better without. So post 4 or 5 some odd years after the passing of my grandmother, my now widowed grandfather had been struggling to manage his depression given the loss of his wife, and loneliness amidst being crippled with ongoing health complications, which complicated just about every facet of his day-to-day life, and surely enough, he was diagnosed with cancer as well. He was on a modular IV and a drip stand at home for quite some time, and despite our collective best efforts between my father and I, we were ultimately unable to postpone the inevitable. After several close calls being admitted to the hospital time and time again, there simply came the hospital visit where he just didn't come back. Bereaved by the untimely loss of his wife and the deterioration of his health in addition to the health concerns, his isolation and jaded nature only seemed to worsen with time, and he was in excruciating agony, losing sleep just about every single night. It was insidiously killing me to see the constant suffering that he was enduring, and I can't even begin to imagine the sheer will and power it took just to endure enough, just in the hopes to see the sun rise the next day. I'm grateful that I no longer have to steal passing glances at him, only to see the looming shadow of death stalking closely behind. Thankfully, I was present at the time of his passing pretty much, and got to say my farewells and express my thanks before he passed. Joined by my father and by one of my aunts, I'm grateful for what I was allowed. So, if you would allow me the grievance, I'd like to honor him with a memoir to pay my due respects. My grandfather, John, led one of the most phenomenal lifetimes I could ever hope to have seen in mine, much of which I was not around to personally witness. And peculiar as it was, and peculiar as it may be, it was more phenomenal, vibrant, and rich than one could ever hope it to be, as told so through the elaborate and fantastical tales he often wove, yet somehow more plain than any and all of the most average of Joes. And even then, I'd imagine many others pale in comparison, which I suppose is befitting, taking into account the nature of such a grand old soul. My grandfather was passionate, loving, curious, inventive, oddly eccentric, perhaps a little wacky and even whimsical at times, but was a man that many would have known to enjoy this cute little rhyme. So much so, in fact, that it's awfully unnatural to see him rest so sublime. But it's long past time, I suppose, to close this happy, and not woeful, witty little rhyming tale that I took great care to compose. My grandfather, John, accomplished in his lifetime what would take the average man 1,000 lifetimes to achieve. Among them are his days as a self-taught scholar, mathematician, and school teacher, to nuclear analyst, a physicist, and a contractor, to a decorated soldier, disaster relief worker, loving husband, and cherished caretaker. My grandfather was a noble man, an empathetic man, who cared deeply for each and every living being on this earth, whether human or not, And beyond that, all of the flora, fauna, and naturalia that make up the earth he viewed all so spectacularly, always seeing the positive and optimistic over the bleak and hopeless, all of which could never have prepared him for the daunting and tiring task of raising and fathering not one, not two, or even three, but 6 children, who would lay unto me my many cherished cousins, and not one, but 2 loved brothers. And even then, his struggle was far from over in providing his wisdom, his life experience, his time, and his favor to me, and not only me, but to those of my generation. Even to those not bound by such a silly notion such as blood, as my grandfather saw even the oddest of strangers as family, and would always lend an ear, lest he remiss and regret missing out on one of the many opportunities to hear one of the many vibrant tales and lifetimes of those he so often encountered. His life stands testament to the exemplary qualities that every human man or woman should strive to exhibit, and the goals that every man or woman should endure to achieve. I doubt there will ever be another to match his greatness, but my grandfather would never have wished to be regarded or admired as a great man, but stood proudly as what every man should be, and stood firm in the belief that one should not do well by others for reward, but because they know their acts to be good. And he stands monumentalized within my memory as my one and only true role model, and a prominent reminder that no matter how hard or bleak things may seem, that there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and there's always something worth your fight if you're willing to fight for it. Your ceiling is only as high as you permit it to be, and your worth is only ever truly recognized and understood by 2 parties, and 2 parties alone. The first being yourself, and the second being the people that you positively impact along the way, not for enrichment or wealth, but because it's what it means to be human. Thank you for your precious gift of perspective and insight, and helping me to appreciate the pure essence of all life and nature, and not simply telling me, but holding my hand and guiding me, and helping me to see it for myself, because I would never have been the person I am today without your invaluable guidance. And out of all the men who could have raised me, I'm honored for it to have been you and my beloved grandmother, your wife, Ruthie. Though I could never hope to fill your mighty shoes, I take solace and steady stride, knowing that I tread that same path you once walked. To my grandfather John, to your lasting legacy. I miss you, buddy. I'm remorseful that you won't be present to see the noble woman I aim to become, but you taught me to never lose sight of myself, and rest assured, I will never. I'll never forget the easier and peaceful times we shared together, and I wish there were more of them. I hope you're at peace, wherever you are. So, this next one is a little bit on the personal side, and I apologize in advance. I hope you're not sensitive to trauma or abuse. Now as to the circumstances regarding my shitbag father's whereabouts, if you could even call him that. The primary reason that he stuck around to aid my ailing grandfather in his final years after my grandfather clothed and fed and financially supported both my father and I in every single one of our endeavors was on account of a pact that him and my grandfather had made, that if my dad stuck around to assist him and provide what longevity he could to his lifespan, that my grandfather would allow him half the deed and residence to his other property in the state of Virginia. Now I know what you might be thinking. Great son, right? Anyway, my father traveled across the country to stay there, and I can only pray that I never fucking see him again. During our final meeting, when I went to help my father pack for moving, we got in a yelling match over some insanely stupid and asinine childish bullshit, frankly, which resulted in me fucking off back to my life instead of us finishing up, having a few rounds, having a positive night on the town together, doing something unforgettably memorable. Charming, isn't it? Thankfully, I pray to God I never see him again. To which I would also like to say a couple words. During the earliest years of my childhood, I have few memories of my father being loving, compassionate, and caring. But those few memories are blotted and shrouded with an ominous black and bleak aura of thunderclouds. Who I once knew, and who I would have called my true father, devolved into a violent, vengeful, sociopathic, emotionally manipulative abuser that I couldn't even regard as a person anymore. Someone who I can now only bring myself to pity. My troubled youth continued onward to be a blacker, more desolate, more bleak and colorless world on account of you, and by the years of my young adulthood, I couldn't even recognize myself as a living being with compassion or feelings anymore. I feared you for the longest time, on account of this ever-increasing nature of volatility, never feeling safe. I never thought at any point in my life that you were a figure, a defender, a father, a confidant, or even a person I could approach for guidance. I hushed and discounted myself in fear of retaliation from you if I stood up to you and opposed you. Where would I go? Who could I turn to? What if me standing up for myself made the abuse worse? These questions plagued my mind constantly as I sat mute. I was brimming with a raging anger so powerful and palpable that you could taste bloodlust in the air upon walking into the same room that I happened to occupy. I spent many nights feeling bitter, neglected, jaded, cold, and isolated with no one who would bother to listen to me, being viewed only as a reclusive monster and nothing more. I constantly discounted and second-guessed every single thought that happened into my mind, and tore myself apart and critically killed myself over every single little imperfection and every minor ounce of flaw that I could find. But those flaws were never mine, and it took me forever to discover that, after you subjecting me to countless therapists and countless counselors who could never find out what was wrong. The problem was never me, Dad. The problem was you. The dreams that should have been were replaced with hauntingly nightmarish and warped, fevered delusions of you suffocating me in my sleep. Something I never gathered the courage to tell you about. For a time, I felt truly hopeless. Completely distant, devoid of feeling, unresponsive, morose, and lacking all compassion and empathy, completely apathetic to the world and to the suffering of others around me. You destroyed any chances of my happiness and robbed me of the invaluable years and innocence I could have had. You robbed me of any possibility of personal fulfillment and freedom in realizing my circumstances in regards to my trans identity, as well as the opportunity to begin my hormonal transition sooner. You denied me my personage and freedom in finding who I am, by contesting my transition even now, and regarding me as unnatural, mentally ill, and disturbed, placing your bitterness and selfishness and detestment for me above my happiness in a ham-fisted and futile attempt to denigrate me, rather than bothering to hear my anguished pleas or show any sign or care of compassion for the one child that you should have stuck around to raise. But you were never there for me, Dad. You were never there for me. You robbed me of parenthood, a happy family, an average upbringing by driving away any and everyone who was ever a mother to me, or tried, because you tried to make your damages my own. But in your futile attempt to mold me in your image, you provided me something that I could have never gained otherwise. I gained perspective, empathy, I gained compassion and understanding, and I'm grateful for it. Love for nature, love for the earth and its many inhabitants, the fauna and flora that make it so vibrant and so full of fluorescence and life. We've been at each other's throats and have had the tension of bitter enemies just about as far back as I can recall. You've desecrated my existence and violated every ounce of my trust every single time I walked out on a trembling limb with hardly any support out of sympathy to provide it to you. You voluntarily voted in an arrogant, pompous, racist, narcissistic, sociopathic, xenophobic charlatan and dictator who would challenge the rights of my community and argue my existence and those of my same caliber. A man who would collapse the lives of any migrant, struggling family, or entity who would exercise their right in opposition to or challenge his beliefs, making life inhospitable and unlivable for those who deserve it the most, who have for years now settled for less. It's evident to me, more now than ever, that you've chosen your side. Allied to hate, self-sustainment, and lack of humanity and all empathy, proving beyond shadow of the doubt that you'd become everything I'd long feared you would, and everything that I'd sworn to myself to never become. You've given rise to a platform of hate, ignorance, and intolerance and infamy that I simply cannot abide. You've by your own hand, by nobody's will other than your own, chosen anger, resentment, bitterness, and isolation, and you deserve just that. You've chosen a lifetime of viewing the world as cold and dead, and chosen to look upon everyone around you with suspicion, and with a dagger primed, readily pointed at the throat to any entity who would contest you. Through all of the trauma, through all of the ruin, through all of the emotional damage I've suffered, and isolation and despair that you've clouded my life with, and through all of the bodily trauma I've suffered and endured, by your hands, or my own, I can rest easy knowing that the worst thing I'll ever have to have survived was you. You did not break me. Nothing can, and nothing will. And when you're on your deathbed, cold, bitter, angry, lost and helpless, I promise to send you a photo of me post-transition on the beaches of Maui with a Mai Tai in my hand, joined by an incredibly fit and fine tomboy wife that I can truly call Daddy. But don't you think for a fucking second that I'm going to sacrifice any ounce of my happiness, sparing a second for you to occupy my mind in the meantime, up until that moment. I am always going to pity you, and I can only pray that you find the resolve and the inner strength to turn your life around. Forever your daughter, Serenity. For those curious, I'm in the midst of writing a succinct autobiography detailing the events of my childhood, the abandonment, the raising as an only child, my upbringing and schooling years, as well as the suffrage with my dad, the injuries that I've suffered and the mental scarring that I've endured, my self-discovery in regards to gender identity and just how I did it, personal specifics in the etymology of my chosen name, why I'm an advocate, feminist, and rights activist now, personal changes I've made in regards to wellness and fitness post-beginning HRT, my plans and goals for my future, as well as many other personal effects and affairs, including the surgical procedures I have planned for anyone who would be so generous and kind as to contribute or donate to help me fund them, but especially in regards to those curious about the journey that I've had. And no matter what past negativity has befallen you, that you are always in control of your own destiny. You shape who you are. You determine who you are, not other people. Don't let your power be the power of others unless they support you. Seek your light and don't resign yourself to melancholy. Live free and be happy. Now then, as many of you may already be aware, following the passing of my grandfather, my living circumstances have changed dramatically. I am now in a domestic living situation with my current partner, Rivia, aka Miss Meshi. The moving process, in truth, was really quite simple. I set up a U-Haul rental, packed all my shit, and we left back to her place to the neighboring city where our apartment is situated. Funny how I've come to firsthand understand and acknowledge the cultural accuracy behind the U-Haul meme. The initial moving of all my shit took quite some time, maybe a good 6 or so hours, because you never truly understand how much shit you own until you have to move it all. And I have a ton of clothes, media, and aesthetics things, so it really was quite the endurance match, because I'm quite a materialistic bitch, in all honesty. Settling in initially, like anyone would assume, was really quite difficult. As before, what I had was kind of a segregate dwelling with impositions from my father in tandem with my grandfather encroaching upon what was supposed to be my private quarters and driving me up a wall with continued harassment. This is a very, very different, more domesticated and cozy domicile lifestyle. But in truth, it got off to a very rocky start. Acclimating for a time was incredibly difficult, as Miss Meshi is very, very particular about the way things are done around here, and the quality that her space is kept in. And we're kind of at opposing lifestyles in certain respects. And given my history of being reprimanded and ass-ridden and overwhelmed by my father's unwanted pertinence in just about every facet of my life, it brought out a lot of traumatic deflection and defense mechanisms and behaviors from both of us, not knowing entirely how to bridge the gap in communication. The likes of which led to a few arguments and domestic violence issues here and there, if I'm being honest, but it's an ongoing reconstructive process for me, kind of learning what it feels like to be alive again, rather than viewing myself as an apathetic, hollowed-out shell of a person. Granted, my father was always made it out to me that I was attempting to victimize myself and cast blame upon him, which is of course a giant red flag of patterned psychological abuse, but we're largely on good terms again, as of now. Which of course brings us to recent work history and just what I've been up to off the grid, so to speak. I got back into contact with an old boss of mine that had taken a receiving lead position at the Woodland Park Zoo, so I pretty much had a shoe-in and made efforts to bridge the connective gap to get in there as a stocking lead for the gift shops. Hands down the best working experience and work decision I've ever had and made in my life. I made many friends, all of which were queer, and loved all my coworkers, some of whom were trans, which allowed me an inviting sense of social acuity I've long been disallowed, and largely alien to, which encouraged an inviting and friendly working atmosphere and environment where I could unapologetically be myself, as well as wear my heart and personality on my sleeve authentically, which alleviated so much tension, stress, and anxiety that you have no fucking idea. I cannot express how important that is for and as a queer person. I got to spend much of my time during the winter walking the zoo pelted with the blistering cold breezes of winter and piping hot cocoa and coffee, enjoying the warmth of the neon lights that adorn the many winding paths, which largely reawakened my natural sense of curiosity and adventure that had been suffocated being stuffed inside times more often than not. My work was both fulfilling and demanding, which invigorated my spirits and compelled me to undertake new daunting challenges I was reluctant initially to take that resulted in increased social confidence and capacity, turning me from a socially claustrophobic chrysalid to a brilliant butterfly with tools for cashiering, folding into a field and sense of retail customer service I had never before experienced, which was awesome. The environment at Woodland Park Zoo was so surprisingly progressive that I never really felt like I had to reserve myself or make any compromises, which allowed me to shine and turn to my duties with ambition and diligence, as opposed to dully dragging my empty husk of a sleep-deprived corpse to work every day, only to be left with the impression that I was working myself into an early grave. Ha, get it? You get it. But unfortunately, my job was seasonal, with the offer having ended in late April, so I had to take my leave. That and my head boss, for whatever reason, wasn't very fond of me. Why? I don't know. But it was invaluable and amazing for what it was, and I'm grateful for the opportunity and the restoration and drive that it gave me. Needless to say, I'm now in the market for new work, because I got bills to pay, and food to gorge, and liquor to consume, and I'm a broke dead bitch. And if there's one thing I've learned from being an adult, it's that liquor doesn't buy itself, unless you're pretty. And thankfully, I am. I really should hit bars more. Anyway, never mind that. Which leads us directly into the next topic of discussion. I wanted to relay to you guys some pretty drastic cosmetic changes I'm going to be striving towards post-following through with hormonal transitioning. Now that I've begun to fully recognize some bodily redistribution and visible physiological changes, I want to express how affirming the entire experience is and has been, and why I believe you should promptly shotgun any doubts you may have of pursuing gender-affirming care, if you believe it to be right for you, or if you're having doubts, or if you're having thoughts. It's an invigorating experience to finally fully embrace yourself instead of deluding yourself into a blind stupor and dwelling in the mediocrity and melancholic lifestyle that trying to live happily in a sort of half-life can provide you, experience-wise. You feel empowered, more motivated, you gain self-respect and start looking upon yourself with dignity rather than disdain and disgust for yourself. For those who don't follow or keep up with my social medias, like my Instagram and my Facebook and all that good stuff, I've been going to the gym relentlessly over the course of the past year, with substantial bodily definition as a result. I am in the best physical and mental health state I've ever been in my life previously. I'm more motivated than ever before. I can actually push myself out of bed in the morning and ambitiously look forward to the next hurdle to hop over, rather than wincing and anticipating it as another blow to the ribs to come. I have so many plans for my future pursuits, such as bodily revision surgery, which is of course gender-affirming care, as well as facial feminization surgery and electrolysis to boot, to hopefully quell the majority of my dysphoria and dysmorphia, as well as get rid of the facial hair and bumpy texture I've always despised in the hopes of attaining that soft porcelain appearance. I'm also genuinely considering a full body bleaching, because I really want to have that pale lunar skin for goth aesthetic, which leads me to say that I've finally settled on what piercings I want. I want my bridge done, accompanied by angel bites and a septum piercing to A, look far more lesbian, again in a gender-affirming way, and 2, so men will quit fucking hitting on and or talking to me, which has happened almost non-stop. Cutting my hair shorter didn't seem to do the trick, and I gotta make some realistic compromises, yeah? You understand. Second to this, I have finally settled on my choices for tattoos, with their own personal symbolisms, while representing something deep and important to me. My Life is Strange tattoo is going to feature a watercolor monarch butterfly with the storm sweeping Arcadia Bay with the little time reversal swirl, and the text reading "This action will have consequences" below it,
with the swirl being in UV ink. That way when the UV gives out eventually and dies, it will still have its symbolism. The storm representing the chaos and unpredictability the course of my future will take, and the quote is a double entendre reminder of my past choices and how my future is determinable by my own hands and actions, and that nothing is ever permanent. My second tattoos, which are kind of a yin and yang, will feature arcane motifs, with Violet's mechanical framing, representing the inescapable fact that I am only human, and whatever is built upon that is all character, will, experience, trauma, and whatever the past has contributed to compromise me of my present self. Or comprise me of my present self, not compromise. The muscle tissue of my body acting as a protective shell for vulnerability. While Jinx's clouds will be recolored to the colors of the trans flag, representing safety, visibility, and vulnerability, it being a signal beacon metaphorical to both finding myself and not abandoning myself when I was feeling lost and isolated, with only myself to rely upon, and as a sign of community and a safe haven for those who need or will need the same in the future. And it's part of the same reason I'm going to the gym as well. I feel it's a big responsibility to protect those in need, and it's my duty, as one strong enough who has faced the burdens of my past, to bear the burdens now for those who may not have the strength that I once required. The clouds will be lined in neon ink to symbolize purity, and how being true to yourself could never be deemed as anything less. And finally, my arms will be cut short on the ends of Violet's tattoo to accommodate some blackout artwork featuring a broken glass motif, or something that just wraps all the way around. Just because I think they look pretty fucking spiffy, and a little bit masked, and I like that. Beyond that, I still look young, and with the help of gender-affirming care side effects like fat redistribution, lack of acne, fuller and more healthy hair, to more fuller and healthy-looking skin, lack of balding and fat redistribution, as well as having fucking titties, I still look like a young and healthy 20-some-odd instead of 30 and miserable. Youngest I've been mistaken for up to now is 18, so I'ma rock that shit. I have always taken a particularly expressive interest in Gothic Victorian culture and style, as well as Japanese kawaii street Lolita. So, no time like the present. Chase your dreams, don't let them die. I've spent the past few months updating my wardrobe a bit, and I hope that my future jobs will finance some more outfits from time to time for style and experimentation, and I might get into cosplay as well. I also really want to get into contacts and learning makeup techniques to really modify and fully embrace my alternative appearance. I've always been kind of the non-conforming black sheep loner of my family, so I'm gonna lean full throttle into it. If I've learned anything from gender-affirming care and the political stigma in the world today, it's that you should live unapologetically and never compromise who you are to sate the malicious feelings and ostracizations and assumptions you may face from other people. There comes a time in your life where you prospectively come to understand that sooner or later, you gotta stop living for everybody else and start living for the satisfaction of yourself. And I don't want you to learn that lesson late like I did. I lost out on so many years of happiness, depriving myself and freedom, trying to placate my negativity to futilely non-conforming to something I wasn't ever meant to be, and a skin and appearance and a gender that I never felt comfortable with and in. You gotta do you, boo. Whatever that is, chase it, and don't let it go. Next off, I wanted to briefly provide you guys some insights as to the working concepts and themes behind the VTuber model that I've been trying to get off the ground for quite some time. Much of my time behind the scenes in my absence was purposed to really fleshing out the concept of what I really wanted to make, and I have since decided upon 3 different iterations of the model to follow, an elaborately woven narrative I've taken great creative care to craft. I knew I wanted something horror-themed, because as many of you may know, I really like horror, the paranormal and the supernatural, and inexplicable, forces that are unseen or influences that make no fucking sense, much like many of Lucio Fulci's works. But what I was working with before was just a baseline, whereas now it's going to have an unsettling and eerie ambiance, as well as a Lovecraftian influence, which I think will really make the concept unique and truly pull it together as one of a kind. Without going into too much detail and giving too many key things away, I've been plotting out a sort of storyboard and musing over different components and concepts I wanted to tinker with, and I think the majority of it throughout the model and its accessories are steeped in allegory and metaphor for people to interpret, which I think is pretty cool personally, as people will view it as abstract, and their impression for the concept could greatly differ from my own, or what was intended. But it mostly has to do with time, eternity, rebirth, life after death, and metamorphosis. Nothing super solidified or profound yet, but I'm going to start producing idea webs and sifting through what I want and don't want for representation, and I think the idea is really fantastical and elaborate for what I have so far. Beyond that, when I can get my new job and start setting aside the funding for commission work, I really want to hire emote artists and connect with people and see if what I'm going to try to be doing is even possible to make within a model, because I think it's that profound and advanced. Storyboard artists with the narrated cinematic introduction video, screens, and of course the model and rigging of the model itself. Seriously, I cannot wait until I can show you guys what I've been dreaming up. But realistically, it won't be for a couple years or so I'm going to use my time wisely to research components that I need to really bring my undead baby to life, like auxiliary stuff such as lighting and cameras and learning VTube Studio and all that wacky stuff, so I can actually know what the fuck I'm doing when the time comes down for it. Which brings us to the final section of this video. Really fast, I just want to mention that yes, I do indeed plan on finishing The Walking Dead Season 2 and Life is Strange series that have both been on indefinite hiatus since my absence. So rest assured they will be done as soon as I'm possibly able. I have a gym interview stated for Thursday that I have to prioritize for the time being, but certainly after that. Next, I wanted to briefly mention that I already have my next gaming projects planned, and will be uploading the trailers to those series either at the end of the aforementioned as standard, or give you updates via my Blue Sky account, which you can find and follow at yourmeshivt.blueskysocial, BSKY. And last but not least, to round out this video, I wanted to impart to you a multitude of upcoming gaming projects and new releases that have caught my eye that you can expect from me in the coming months, time permitting. From the riotous shooting and looting cataclysmic chaos and batshit meteoric mayhem of Borderlands 4, to the luminous and shrouded grasslands of Limgreld, and the traversal of the endless nocturnal horizons that await in Elden Ring, Night Rain. To confronting suppressed haunting memories of times long past in Don't Nod's Lost Records, Bloom and Rage, the talented team behind Life is Strange 1 and 2. To undertaking the perilous journey to the mountain shrine and assuaging the forest souls that doubt the bright, brilliant, and beaming forests of Kena, Bridge of Spirits. To the silvery moonscapes of From Software's poignant new dark gothic Victorian IP on the newly announced Nintendo Switch 2, The Dusk Bloods.
The gift changes you, slowly consuming every little part of your humanity. I should know. It runs in my blood.
To the ballet of blades and bloodshed that awaits in the war and plague-ravaged lands of Shu in 505's new dark Chinese fantasy action RPG, Wushang, Fallen Feathers.
Who dares to question my will? Standing in the way of my redemption.
I am absolutely reveling and regaling in my crypt, restless with excitement, ready and eager to share all of these spine-chilling, flesh-crawling experiences with you all. And if it wasn't abundantly clear already, let me make this clear now. Cast aside all doubt and reservation that you may have, that if you supported Donald Trump at all during this presidential cycle, if you support him now, if you're a self-proclaimed patriot, if you're a MAGA enthusiast, I will not suffer you, and nor will I personally, by my own code of morals, ever deem you parasitic, scum-sucking, subhuman, sycophantic, protoplasmic, walking, talking, breathing septic tanks as people. I have much to say, but I'll digress here with these words. Make yourselves scarce. Let's crack this casket wide open and exhume this decrepit corpse from hollow church sod and pledge ourselves to a phantasmal